There's no job like your first job. Find out how the brightest minds in HR, talent, and recruiting got their start. This is My First Job, hosted by Mike Wood, only on the Purple Acorn Network.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of My First Job. My name is Mike Wood. I'm your host, and you'll see by my background, I am back in my very poorly decorated home office. But I'm thrilled to be joined today by Tara Turk-Haynes. She is a new person for me that I haven't met, but I've seen a bunch of videos of you on the Purple Acorn Network. Would you just want to give people a quick intro and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm Tara Turk-Haynes, and I am the founder and consultant for Equity Activations. We help companies embed equitable actions into their operations so that they have a strong business for now and for the future. And I am happy to be here.
That's great. And I see in your background you have tons of books, tons of fun things behind you. And I love that they're actually real, because most people have that same type of setup, but it's just like the fake background. Or they have something that's just like one little shelf like I have with some random things on it, because I'm not good at design. But so this podcast is all about our first jobs. And lay it on me. What was your first job?
So I've been debating on whether or not I should do a first job in high school, which, I mean, technically speaking, I guess you could say. So I've told this story before, but my dad, before he passed away, worked at Ford Motor Company in Detroit for almost 40 years. But in addition, he was also a loan shark. He was somebody who loaned money to those who needed money in the plant. So it's not your typical like mobster kind of weird story, but it's more like, people from my community were not able to get bank loans like everybody else. And so my dad turned that into a business. And my first job was actually to count money because he thought that was a very important skill for me to have. And I am not great at the maths. So it definitely was a growth job for me. But, I used to help him count money, and, he had that pen that had like 4 colors to it. So I could make notes of things. Yes, for sure. And he used the time cards from the plant in order to kind of keep his notes together. So that was my very, very first job. And then my first job out of graduate school, I worked at a nonprofit theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey called Crossroads Theater Company. It was my first job, and I did not actually realize that for nonprofits, sometimes it means you're actually paying to work there, because I made no money. Barely making, I made no money because I was commuting from Harlem, where I lived, into New Brunswick every day. But I loved every single moment of it. I went to school for theater, and getting to see theater operations on the other side of it was exhilarating, but also secured the fact that I did not want to do it for the rest of my life.
It's tough having that attached to you as your like way of like living, your something like that. Very quickly you find out what can be a hobby, what can be like a real job, that type of stuff. I also worked for a nonprofit before I got into HR tech. I worked for PBS. And I was a publicist on a bunch of kids shows, and I loved it. But the Boston station we have here was one of the top producers of content. Still is. It still does Antiques Roadshow, and it still does. Downton Abbey was big when I was there.
Love
it. And I absolutely loved it. But at some point, I had to leave because I had to try to earn some money.
It's good. You got to eat.
Yeah, it was more like I need a house, and I'm lucky I was able to get a condo. I got married and house and everything back in like 2014, so it wasn't that bad. I can't imagine the same situation right now.
No, 100%. It's a labor of love for sure. I did it, but I'm glad we got those things out of the way early in our career, so we knew.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where at some point, like I was like, if I'm ever gonna have these goals in my life, if I'm ever gonna have a house, if I'm ever gonna have some sort of financials, I need to go. And HR Tech welcomed me with open arms and said, "This is the place where you can make slightly more money."
Well, that transition's really good. And I tell people who are like early in their career, explore, do whatever you can. Like, this is the time, right? To just, not have like set expectations. I really hate when people are just like, making people super decisive about what their career path is, like right out of college or early on, because they just feel like you don't know yet, and you won't know until you experience life a little bit.
I love that. And you're going to be a different person later in your life than you are at 20.
100%.
I talk to college students a lot, and I say, don't judge your life by what everybody puts out on LinkedIn, because it's all fake.
Hmm.
It's just it's a filtered version of somebody's life, and it's not in a competition with anybody else.
Hmm.
But at this point in your life, take some chances. Go have some
Yeah.
fun. You have the least amount of responsibility that you will ever have, like right now.
Yeah.
So go
100%.
out, get it out of your system.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like work has really changed since
Mhm.
like our parents' generation. So your dad, he worked at a nice union job at Ford. He was there
Yep.
for 40 years. My dad was a risk manager for an insurance company,
Mhm.
but it was one of those tenured type of things. He was one of the last people to get like a pension.
Right.
So not tenure, but pension.
Yeah.
But there was a reward for working for 50 years or
Exactly.
whatever at the same company, and that just doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't. It
Um,
doesn't. I think that went away. I think in the 80s, when companies started to become global, right? Companies started to sell overseas. You're not, whatever was your mission and core values prior to that are not going to be the same when you have, a parent company that's, thousands of miles away and they don't know you, like, perhaps maybe, the owner of that plant or the owner of that company would have prior to that.
yeah. So I mean, I say jump around. Your career
Yep.
is more. It's not a career ladder anymore.
Right.
It's really just jump around, find something that's interesting to you.
Yep.
I can never answer that question like where do you see yourself in 5 years, and I'm glad I can't answer it to a point. There's a little bit of uncertainty in there, but like things change so quickly
Yeah.
that I can't look that far into the future anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know that we ever, we don't live in a time where you can, right? Like there was a time where that was very sort of typical, and you could sort of plan out that way. I think with technology and the world's changing so quickly, it's really challenging to try to keep up with that, and things are happening in a way that we couldn't even imagine. Like my dad passed away before like the iPhone really took over. So sometimes I think about like, how would I explain the iPhone to my dad, right? Like you have a computer that's your phone, but also can replace all of your cameras at the same time. Like we have to really contextualize how fast we're going. And I think that'll give us a little bit of grace in terms of like really not knowing what the future is going to hold for us.
Yeah, I tell my kids. So I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I tell my 9-year-old that my first car didn't have a clock in it. It was
Right.
in like an optional option that my grandmother decided. Nah, I don't need to know what time it is. I'll just look outside to see if the sun's up.
Right.
And so I had to buy like a little one from CVS to put on the dashboard and stuff.
Right.
And we've gone from that, and I'm only 42
Right.
to like the entire dashboard of a car
It's
is
digital.
computerized.
It's
Yeah.
all digital. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just things change, and I laugh that we used to talk about what is the 2020 workplace going to look like for years and years, and then 2020 comes around, and this global pandemic, and all those predictions gone. Then
Gone.
AI comes around a couple of years later, and now everything
Yeah.
has changed. So
Yeah.
it's nuts. But so you worked at a nonprofit, and then what? You had to get money. So what did you say? What was your money making solution?
So I worked at a nonprofit, and the only, having a degree in theater because I'm a playwright, also still, the only way I knew how to like sort of take care of myself, because I'm a first generation college graduate, I went into corporate and I became an executive assistant for many years. I think that's the only way I knew how to support myself. And I think it was great because it got me to understand business at a really specific level, like across all business. I think everyone should spend time being an executive assistant at some point, because it really does allow you to understand what's important, who's important, how people treat you. There's all these things. And it really actually led to how I got into talent acquisition. I worked for the CEO and the chief people officer at Ticketmaster. Beverly Carmichael was the CPO. She came from Southwest Airlines. She's a mentor to this day. And she was the one who was like, I really think you would be good at talent acquisition. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. I mean, she basically gave me a career path that, I hadn't even thought of. And that had never happened to me before, where someone was like, I think you'd be good at this other thing. And so I became a corporate talent acquisition coordinator for Ticketmaster. We got acquired by Live Nation, so I was part of that layoff back then. I took some time off and I detoured into working in editorial for Variety magazine. It was a great time for me because Variety, had been around since the 1880s. So always a very substantial and very important voice in media journalism and entertainment journalism. I worked on a Rizzoli book for them as well. So that was another skill set I acquired in terms of project management and getting to go through the archives and really kind of working with Tim Gray, who was the editor-in-chief at that time. I got Ava DuVernay in the first Power of Women issue because I had seen this movie my friend was in, and I was like, y'all should know who she is.
That's fantastic.
And then the Sean Moriarty, who had been the CEO of Ticketmaster, was chairman of this little startup. That was a tech startup that he was like, they need your help. Like there's like 15 people. They don't know like how to run. They know their business, but they don't know how to run the office. And so I think Variety had gotten acquired by Penske Media, and I didn't know what the future of that was going to be. And so I went and worked at the tech startup called MetaCloud. I was there for, I want to say like 4 years. We got acquired by Cisco, which was a great story to, ending of that story, because a lot of those companies at that time were either going under or, going public and then going under. So we got acquired. Cisco was really large for me. I'm not the kind of person who feels like they can make impact in a company that has like thousands and thousands of people. So I couldn't really directly see like what, I could do, because I'd, overseen talent, HR, facilities, before we got acquired. So I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Sean was then CEO of Demand Media at the time, which, turned into Leaf Group when I joined. He's like, that we need help from a talent acquisition perspective. So I joined. Chief People Officer at the time was Jill Angel, joined and, really kind of revamped our talent acquisition process there. Employee engagement, I was responsible for internal comms as well. And then 2020 hits and, the murder of George Floyd happens, and every company is, in the midst of trying to discover like, what is our responsibility here? I think Leaf Group was part of that as well. So they created a role called VP of DE&I and Talent. Some people think that I, got promoted into it. No, it was posted. I interviewed for it. It was really hard because I really wanted to make impact. The idea was that, I've always been a champion of representation in terms of talent, because being an executive assistant, I have been told as a Black woman, like, I had dreadlocks. You need to comb your hair out if you want to have a professional job, or you have to look a certain way. And so I, vowed that, if I was ever in charge of talent, that would never be the case. So, it made sense to combine diversity, equity, inclusion efforts into the talent acquisition pool. And I oversaw that. I was there for, 7 years total. Then Leaf Group was acquired by Graham Holdings. Then Graham Holdings was like, why do we have a parent company when we're a parent company? So they basically folded the parent company. I went out on my own because it was a time where the job market was terrible. Like I'd never, I was always in-house. And so, this is my first time being a solopreneur. I've been in business for a little over a year and a half now. I'm very lucky, great clients. I'm doing everything from talent acquisition to building out equitable programs, like I said. And it's really exciting because I get to be in other different industries. But my career journey was like all over the place and very full, I'll say. Like it was just really fulfilling to be in many different areas because it all feeds. And now I'm at this point where I feel like they're all coming together to make sense.
Yeah. So in all my interviews with people, you get these little pieces of the puzzle that they are today from their experiences in the past. And
100%.
I mean, I'm lucky I haven't had to deal with any discrimination or thing. I'm a white male. But I know tons of people who have. And it's what I'm seeing now in the current landscape of everything and the latest administration that's just letting fire to everything. every other day. I just talked to somebody in DEI who was a VP of diversity and inclusion at a company, and they just got laid off because their company doesn't want to, or their company does some government business, and so now they can't have DEI attached to
Right.
it. What are people supposed to do? Like, I don't get it.
I initially, even when I first got the job in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I like to say the whole words because I want to challenge people to find out what they have a problem with in any of
Oh,
those
so
three.
you're not Sherm. You're not just getting rid of one of the letters.
Exactly. I'm not trying to get rid of any of the letters. I'm like, tell me what you have a problem with when we're talking about diversity, equity, or inclusion. Like, how are all of those bad words all of a sudden? But I even initially, there are a couple of things. One, I think we didn't collectively define what we were talking about when we're using those terms. And so I think those terms meant a lot of different things for a lot of different companies. I think some companies got permission to be a bit performative, even whether they realize it or not, right? Like, if there's a rush to kind of feel like you're making a difference. So you put up a black box on social media and you go, okay, yes, we care about these things. Whereas the whole purpose of the work was to create an equitable experience and environment for everyone and not just some people. So we're trying to solve problems for those people who have historically been ignored, but that then impacts everyone who's in the workplace because we are creating an equitable work environment. And so, I almost prefer, and I tell some of my clients, like, don't issue a press release and telling people like what you're doing, right? Like, change the words if you want to. That's totally fine because the work should still continue. If you're smart, your business cannot withstand being homogenous. So you have to change. It's a business strategy. Like, the world continuously grows in many different other kinds of communities, increasing women, increasing LGBTQ plus communities, increasing in terms of racial or ethnic groups as well. If your business can be fine not reaching out to any of those potential consumers, then fine, like, stay in your little corner. But that's not possible because the world is going to change. And so you definitely want to be in front of those communities, and you should be able to create the kind of environment where they can thrive as customers as well as candidates and employees.
I love that. It's not like these underrepresented people, it's not like they're going to disappear.
Right.
Like and so, like, there's this whole movement to limit what kids are exposed to
Right.
nowadays, and this whole, like, I have someone in my town that I know got a flyer for different types of families at the beach. It just, like, says this is the family, this is like, some families can have two dads, some families
Right.
can have two moms, whatever. This family, it's all good. She was outraged and she's mad and she thinks that her kids are getting, like, indoctrinated. I'm like, well, you do realize that these people still exist when your kids get older. It's just, are they
100%.
going to be afraid of them, or are they going to talk to them like real people and realize that they're just like everybody else? So
Yeah.
it drives me insane.
It's really like this idea that the curation is elimination, right? And it's not true. All it does is set us up collectively for failure because there are going to be groups of people who are going to remain in the dark and be very ignorant to how other people live. Like, the world is continuously going to go on, right? When I was in high school, I was like in all the gifted and talented programs, of course, and like probably why I have anxiety today. But
Am I living up to the standards set in my gifted years?
Exactly. Yeah. But I went to Eastern Michigan University for a summer where we did journalism for 2 weeks. And in Eastern Michigan, Michigan is it's larger than people think. Like, I'm from this part, and then there's this part up here that doesn't have a lot of Black people in it. And so we all came to the middle for journalism camp.
Now, do you have a demarcation line, like the Mason-Dixon line?
Basically, the colder it gets, the less likely we're going to be up there. But it's already cold down here. We're not going there. But I met a Black woman who said, she was like one of our resident advisors. She said her first year in college, her roommate kept looking behind her. Her white roommate kept looking behind her. She's like, why do you keep looking at me? And she goes, because my grandma told me that Black people have tails. And this was like, this was literally in the late 80s. I'm dating myself. So this isn't like, I was a teenager. So this isn't like a historical, an ancient tale. So what happens when you don't expose yourself to the diverse people, is you get ignorant. They don't go away. You just become less likely to understand what's happening around you.
Yes, yes, 100%. And I would say, I grew up in a very white area. We
Hmm.
had one black family in town that moved away. I don't know if it was because the rest of the town was white, but it was like I just didn't get any experience until I
Yeah,
got older. And
yeah,
you're naturally afraid of what you don't know, or you're ever, but then you talk to people, and people are
yeah,
people, and it
yeah.
doesn't matter. And
And
so, like, I've kept that, like, okay, I want my kids to have a more diverse experience. I want them to learn about as much as they can. Don't pick a side.
yeah,
Learn about everything.
that's the thing, is like you want your kids to have a better life and more like a larger life than you, right? And so curating what goes there really doesn't set them up for whatever that life is, right? You're just holding them back because the world is continuously going to evolve without them. So I really hope that people are doing the work. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to put a blowhorn and say like, hey, we're doing diversity work over here. You can just like do it in your company, quietly do your little audits and make sure like, hey, I want to make sure that these people are getting paid the same way these people are, and that everything's transparent, right? Like we're clearly defining our goals as a company and everyone is understanding of them, like using data really kind of to tell the story so that everybody's on the same page.
I love it. I could talk to you all day, but we're
Yes.
coming out of time with the podcast here. So,
Same.
can you tell people where to find you and
Yes.
how to follow your stuff online?
Absolutely. I am equityactivations.com is my website. I'm venturing out into YouTube, so you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Equity Activations, and T. Tara Haynes on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, as well as obviously LinkedIn. I'm just kind of playing around with how to tell stories, so that in many different ways, so that we're making sure that we're having the right conversations to make workplaces better.
Awesome. I love it. I love that you're up on the socials. I was a social media manager back in the day when social was first out,
Oh,
and I missed the boat on some of these new ones. Like I'm like a lurker on TikTok, but I'm not
yeah,
using it for my brand or anything. I don't know anything, but
yeah.
I'm glad you're using it. So,
I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm sure I'm failing a lot, but I think it's fun to try so I can keep my mind
hey,
fresh. And,
and
you
that's the
know,
whole thing is
yeah,
it's always keep yourself engaged, keep yourself trying new things,
yeah.
and you'll always be moving. Like the worst thing for me would be sitting in the same job forever and not actually learning anything and just waiting to die. So
Oh my gosh, completely. I 100% agree with you. So I think we can still be the experimental people of our youth in some ways. We don't have to work for nonprofits and pay to work there, but we can explore other ways to be creative in our day jobs and what we do for a living.
all right, listeners, I know you're going to want to go and check out T Terra Turk. I knew I was going to screw it up. I told you I was going to screw it up. T
It's so
Terra Turk-Haynes. These are
yes.
like all those like anti-stuttering things I used to do as a kid. T Terra
My name is
Turk-Haynes.
really good for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So check her out. Find her on LinkedIn. You'll see her on some of the Purple Acorn shows too. It's been great talking with you, and I will have you on again. Thanks.
Mike, it was so great talking with you. Thank you so much for the invite. It was a great time.
All right.